because we were just talking about this subject, I'm going to take Brinstar, who's calling in from Connecticut, who has a question about the separation of church and state. Brinstar, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
How you doing, guys?
Doing great. How about yourself?
And not too bad. It's kind of ironic that you guys were talking about church and state, since that's what I was calling up about. Um,
Yeah.
so at I just happened to be overhearing two people talking at work about church and state, and of course I had to interject myself. They were actually saying that church separation of church and state is actually a bad thing. So I came in with the argument that that separation of church and state actually protects their religious rights, because they were claiming that that it was just non-believers just trying to get rid of Christianity. But my argument was, 20 years down the line, if Islam or non-believers, have more voting power and start voting, someone in, and they start trying to pass laws to get, say, the Quran into public schools, well, then it would be, all for separation of church and state. And they didn't really like my argument too much. So I was just wondering if that's a good argument, or why do you think that, like, Christians in particular think that separation of church and state is not a good thing?
I think this is to me, it seems like this is a more recent phenomenon, like a recent growing phenomenon. I think this is a result of the growing trend of Christian nationalism that's happening in the United States right now. Because for a while, you would even see the most ardent of Christians defend the separation of church and state because of exactly the problems that you outlined. Not only just Islam, but even other Christian denominations taking charge of policies in this country is going to ruffle the feathers of the Christian community. So the best solution to this is to keep that shit out, right? And this has tons and tons of ramifications for other things too. For example, teaching evolution in school versus a creation narrative, right? If we didn't have this separation, the lobbyists in this country would absolutely make sure that every single science textbook produced out of Texas, because like most of them are, would include a creation narrative in there somewhere. That the teach the controversy, right? Teach both sides kinds of folks. Like part of the reason why we don't have that is because of the separation of church and state as sort of this statute. So yes, it does protect the liberties of Christians. It gives you a right to express your religion privately and not have to worry about going to a public school or any other public institution and see other religions even represented, let alone have their doctrine enforced upon you in any way, right? So yeah, it's absolutely good for Christians and it's good for everybody. It should be a very clear case to make, but for some I mean, Christian nationalism is just making people stupid. I'll be real. It's a really dumb movement, and it's just going to get dumber as it gets more popular. But that's my take on it. What do you think, Valiant Heathen?
I think there's just kind of a growing misunderstanding among a lot of people in this country what the separation of church and state is,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and how it serves them. Um, and like you said, with the growing threat of Christian nationalism, we're finding, I think, that that misunderstanding becomes even more dangerous when they realize that it doesn't service their ends, their goals. Um,
Yeah, a lot of people
when they
don't
find that they
realize.
can't.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, you're fine. No, just when they find that they can't push their beliefs and the way that they think things should run on the other people because of that, then they have an issue with it. They don't have an issue with it when it's actively benefiting them. But as soon as it's not, get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, the history of this idea, first of all, I'm seeing folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff say, oh, separation of church and state isn't even in the First Amendment. It's just written in a letter. First of all, this phrase was popularized by Thomas Jefferson, one of the writers of some of our several founding documents, but especially in regards to the Establishment Clause and the free exercise clause. In talking about this, you have to understand in the context of American history, a lot of colonies that first started in America were exclusively chartered by religious denominations. You had Protestant colonies and you had Catholic colonies, and there was like the rule of law kind of based around these religious practices sometimes, right? Like that influenced local law of the land. And so when the United States was forming, this was kind of a result of this, to say, okay, well, we have these different Christian religious denominations. We want to create this thing so that we can all work together and not have to worry about what the Catholics think about this or what the Protestants think about this or whatever. So again, it is made by Christians for Christians. That's what this sort of it does have the benefit of helping us as well, though, right? So that if we ever have kids, I don't have kids, but if you have kids that are going to school right now and are having to deal with that, don't have to deal with religious texts or doctrine of any kind. And I'm talking about it in a school sense, but really, again, it does affect other policy as well, right? I mean, let's be real. The abortion stuff that's happening in this country is incredibly religiously motivated. Most people who are in the pro-life crowd are not doing it for exclusively secular reasons. They're doing it for religious reasons. And these organizations that have been pushing and pushing to overturn Roe v. Wade are doing it for just that. So it affects everybody. It helps everybody to have this clause. And I do worry about the sanctity of our First Amendment and our separation of church and state, because it's going to be wild. But anyway, that's our takes, Brinstar. What do you think?
I think I answered it perfectly. I really appreciate you guys taking the time and going through it with me.
Of course. And Brinstar, here's what you do. You tell your friend to call into this show. If you can't convince them, I'll try my best to do it. Okay.